So reporters, you can start putting in the chat if you have a question. We'll go off based off the chat. Okay, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Do I ask it in person or do I type it out?
No, you can just ask it in person. In the chat, just put next or me or I have a question, anything like that. And then you could say like, oh, this is for Matt, and then go on with your question.
I do have a question for Matt.
Hi.
Hi. My question is if there are differences in how you approach the sound for a project that's for a big studio versus for like a smaller indie film. Like, is there one that you kind of have more freedom with, or is there one that is a little bit more difficult?
Well, in my experience for designing film for a soundtrack, the closer you can get to the director and understand their vision early on, the better it is. That's not always possible on those big films because the director, for good reason, only really wants to talk to a couple of people. And if you've got a team of 30 all yelling in his or her ear, it can become quite disorienting and difficult for them. So your ideas are funneled through sort of the senior on the project. And it's just a much longer, necessarily longer process. Whereas on a smaller film, such as we'll talk about Shadows, we were talking with Taika every day and laughing along and joking and trying out ideas. And that makes for in my experience, a much more organic process for the sound design. And I guess for that reason as well, it doesn't have to take sort of 30 weeks because you have that direct connection. That's one difference.
Okay, Gareth, your turn.
Yes, so my question's for everybody, and I would just be curious about the last year. We had that shutdown where for a long time it was unclear when production was going to resume, what rules were going to have to be followed. And I know various countries started ahead of schedule. Can you tell us essentially how did that affect you? Did you just keep plowing ahead with projects, or did you have to kind of wait? And what was it like when things started to resume? Was it a flood of offers coming at you, or how did things go?
Shall I start that one? Well, we here at POW, when the pandemic hit and we went into lockdown, everywhere almost did at the same time, and we thought the whole industry had collapsed. And so we thought, well, we've got these skills, we've got all this history of working in the industry, why don't we put our heads together and try and come up with something that's slightly different? And so we came up with an idea that was more sort of fine arts, civic arts focused, more than film, and something that we wanted to do a long time ago, which was to build a geolocative sound art project, which means you stick on your headphones and wherever you are in GPS, you hear a soundtrack that corresponds to that GPS, like an extremely localized radio. We thought, well, our lifeblood, our bread and butter from birth basically has been to create pictures only using sound. How about if we try and do this when we have no picture as a guide? And that was one project that we started. But now we're sort of coming back into normal and started resuming our day job. But that was a lovely foray into the arts.
Nice.
On my end, because I'm in the intellectual property side, so I'm in a non-writing EP. We got much more busier than before because we felt, the thing that went around was that the studios and streamers were starting to basically acquire stuff to get prepared for when things are opening up. And at the same time, because of the buying season, it slowed down completely. They were gearing up, buying even more. So we were, in a sense, we were literally in pitch meetings, once, twice a week, which is, a little bit on my end, which could be, it was a little bit a lot. So, which was great in that end, but at the same time as we, you know, even if you sold something, it still didn't go into production. So we were still on hold until things actually started opening up more. But we saw our business, you know, just become much more busier than the last maybe 2 years. So, which was great in that end. But again, we're not going to probably be seeing these shows that we have already sold until 2022, maybe, or the end of 2021.
Sense.
So I'm fortunate in that I'm in animation primarily. And when COVID hit, we were in the middle of production on a number of different shows. And we thought, you know, oh, this will be fun. We'll get like 4 weeks off or whatever, because they're just going to pause. I mean, there's no way this is going to keep going, right? And boy, were we wrong. Like within a week, the studios, or maybe 2 weeks, there was like sort of a 2-week lull. But the studios had figured out how to record all the voice actors from their homes, how to do all the they had, I'm pretty sure they got rigs to their animators at their homes. And so they just continued production like really fast. And it was actually busier. It felt busier than pre-COVID. There was a lot of extra things that happened, I recall, like the Paw Patrol folks asked us to specifically write a song about washing your hands that they could put on YouTube. And the Daniel Tiger people did like an emergency episode, COVID special, which was basically a clip show, but we had to like remix some of our songs. So all of a sudden we were doing episodes that weren't even like on the docket to begin with. And it was actually really nice. I consider us very fortunate to be in animation just for this exact situation. Many of my peers that were in live action just saw all their work dry up. Some people had to go get like real jobs or whatever. And it's very unfortunate. But yeah, I think we were just so lucky. Really the challenge though for me personally in those first couple of months was that we lost our childcare. And so I had to look after my son during the day up till, I don't know, whenever he would go to bed. And then I would start working, and I was burning the candle at both ends, and it was actually really doing me in. So by the time we were able to get our childcare back in it was like May or so, it was like a relief for me. So that was really the challenge, was like sort of balancing the work and the life during that time. I mean, it was a pretty intense couple of months. But other than that, yeah, work didn't slow down for us. It was like pedal to the metal. So
Nice.
All right, Andrew, let's go to you.
Hi. Yeah, my question's for James. I'm wondering, what are some differences in approach when working on songs versus scores for an animated series?
right. So I was just talking about this yesterday on a panel, and I did the math, and we're somewhere north of 500 songs for Daniel Tiger in over 6 seasons. It was like 560 somewhere in there. So we do a lot of songwriting, and it is definitely a completely different nature to scoring. The process that we use on Daniel Tiger, well, first of all, you know, they're communicating their educational messages through the songs. So they send us the little blurb that they want us to incorporate into the song. And they research all that out with early childhood educators and everything. So they've got that whittled down to just a little phrase, and they send it to us, and we write 3 different hooks and send that to the producers. Hooks meaning like the chorus of the song based on that little blurb. And then they pick the one they like, and that goes to all the songwriters. And then we write our songs for the following week. And then the next week we demo for the next set of songs, and we just sort of leapfrog back and forth. It's a hectic schedule. Every song has to be exactly 1 minute. Like the second count is for international purposes, when they send the show overseas, they need to, for the cue sheets, they need to make sure everything is exactly the 1 minute. The minute count is exact. So that's a challenge. Like, how do you get like a song? Like, I've been 3 seconds short before. Like, well, okay, I guess I'll just put a little bass slide at the beginning of 3 seconds. I don't know. These are not challenges that we have when we do scoring, right? Like, scoring scoring is a lot easier in some sense because the scene writes itself, right? Like when you get a scene and you're watching through it, there's only really a couple of ways you could score it, right? It's not like writing a song that has a hook and a catchy melody and like what style of music should that be, and how, the jokes are all there, the action is all there, and it's my job to just sort of underscore the story and just sort of enhance the story that's being told, and especially the jokes, like enhancing the jokes and the comedic aspects. So yeah, totally different nature than the songwriting. And honestly, as a composer, I know when we started writing the songs for Daniel Tiger, I felt like that was sort of a weaker, sort of one of my weak spots was like the songwriting aspect. And I'm so thankful that we've done the 6 seasons now, because I feel like I am a far better songwriter now than I was before. And so that's nice to just kind of get better at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So now we have Benji. Benji, you have 2 questions that you put in the chat. So let's just go one at a time, and then I'll let you take it from there.
Awesome. Yeah, we can just start with the first one. Yeah, so my first question is, do you guys have any musical, like sound producing influencers, like influences in particular, like people that have been pivotal to you? And, have those people impacted your career choices early on or now or just in general?
I mean, I absolutely do, but does someone else want to go first? I feel bad talking twice in a row.
I'll just jump in here briefly and say that there's 2 people, they're both Kiwis. And when I first started, I was at university. I've told the story a million times, so sorry if you've heard it before. And I was intending to become a composer. I was flatting with someone called Polly McKinnon, who's now a fabulous dialogue editor. And she was working at a place that did sound effects for TV. And I went down and I met Tim Preble, who you might know if you follow the sound industry. He runs the Music of Sound blog, and their musical approach to sound design actually got me hooked. And then through them, I came to know the greats such as Ben Burt and Walter Murch and the big sound designers of the 20th century.
Awesome. Thank you.
Shall I go next?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So so it sounds cheesy or trite or whatever, like, but I'm a child of the 90s. So for me, there were 2 big influences on my musical career. The first, which is the super cheesy thing, was Trent Rezner from 9 Inch Nails. Just being like, I was a synthesizer player when I was in high school, and that was during the grunge era, right? And so everybody thought I was a total nerd. And then 9 Inch Nails came along and it was like, oh, wait, what? You can do like keyboard stuff and it's like cool and like kicks butt. So so that was a big deal to me when I was a kid, right? Like, or teenager. And then the interesting thing there is that he ended up becoming a world-class composer, award-winning composer, Oscar-winning composer, right? So I thought that was an interesting thing, how he was sort of an influence in one area and then, became an influence in my soundtrack, composer side. And then obviously the other super cheesy one is John Williams, because I'm a Star Wars guy. And John Williams was the reason why I decided to become a composer. And it was basically, I've talked about this before as well, but it was basically like the feelings that I got when I heard his music in those films from the 80s was the way I wanted to make other people feel. Like, I get really emotional hearing those themes and things. Like, even when I'm not watching the movies and like Yoda's theme comes on, I'm like, oh my God. Like, that's the way I want to make other people feel. And if I can do even a 10th of that, I feel like I've accomplished my career goals. So yeah, those are my 2 big musical influences.
Amazing. Thank you. And yeah, so I'm going to ask just one more question, which is for both you guys. Who are your dream collaborators in terms of directors, actors, musicians? Are they some of those people that were early inspirations? Are they people that, you've learned about since your career progressed? Just who are your dream collaborators?
Well, I'm going to jump in and plug one of my favorite movies. It's by J.A. Bayona, called El Orfanato, The Orphanage. I think it was made around the early 2000s, and it's got everything I love. It's got ghosts, not only ghosts, but ghost kids who are 10 times as scary as adult ghosts. It's got a beautiful score. It's got beautiful sound design, and it's actually got a very beautiful story arc. It's dark, but it's wonderful. And I think I was really excited when I took my boy to see Jurassic World 2, and he was the director of it. And it's got some brilliant similarities with El Orfanato, that film. So, I mean, wonderful work to that director. And I'd say Guillermo del Toro, who is involved in production in El Orfanato, but obviously has directed some of the most wonderful films that we've seen over the last few years. He was actually going to come and direct The Hobbit down here a few years ago, but ended up being Peter Jackson instead. I'm not sure what went on there, but I'd love him to come down and do some more work down here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
And George, did you want to answer the first question there? I feel like we blew past you there.
Oh, no. I mean, because I'm, I love music. Look, like I said, I'm a producer, so music. I grew up in music, so I mean, especially the soundtracks. I'm an 80s fan of movies, so they always had those. Like Beverly Hills Cop had an awesome theme that always excited me. And then when I saw the cut of Star Wars, I think James, you were talking about it, is when I saw there was no music or sound or composer to just dialogue. I was like, wow, the movie is a whole different thing once you add all those elements, which is super exciting. But as a producer, I'm always, I always say the sound, music, composing is always very important in any TV show or movie. So I'm always inspired by like people like Matt and James, because what we do is, we put things together and, and try to be creative in a sense of, try to put something great on screen. You guys have to really, create the feeling so the audience can sit there and be like, wow, this is awesome. So that was my 2 cents on the music.
Nice. I like that. I always like to say, like, you don't always notice what we do, like sound and music, but your brain does. Like if it's not there, you know, like your brain's like, something's not right here, So, and I kind of like that, where we can sit in that subliminal area. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a brilliant comment. I love that when people ask me, is it really that important to do sound effects and sound? I say, well, try watching it with the sound off and see how long you last. And then I always get,
that's true.
Oh, that's ridiculous. And I go, oh, yeah.
By the way, I love when sound design becomes a bit like music. And what I mean by that is there's a theme from Indiana Jones that is called the punch sound. Okay, like that punch sound effect that they use in all the Indiana Jones movies is the best punch sound effect. Like, and it's so iconic and instantly recognizable. So yeah, I love when sound design can kind of do that and become, like a trademarked sound. They like the Wilhelm scream, like that kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, that's great. Anyhow, sorry, I feel like I derailed everything here.
Sorry, no. I was just going to say, as well as dream collaborators and directors and so on, I'm really a big fan of hearing unheard voices as well. I'd love to hear more about, because we get so much I don't know what it's called in other places, but we call it colonial voices, such as the the dominant voice of a country or of an area. And I really love to hear the voices that you don't hear so much. I mean, the word diversity might be a bit overused now, but I think it's still relevant. And we're all about that at POW. I mean, we've got a podcast. I can't tell you the name of it at the moment, but it's one that we're seeking funding for, and that really is all around these unheard voices. And I think that's hot at the moment. I love seeing stories from other cultures that I might not have paid much attention to, because we don't just get it in our media so much. And I think that's proven on Netflix as well. I mean, some of the highest rating shows are from cultures that you don't necessarily trade with or associate with or come through in your media that much.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say real quick about dream collaborators. Like, most of my dream collaborators are just that, they're dreams. Like, it's like Steven Spielberg is not going to happen. right? So I'm not even going to put that out there into the universe. So I try to keep my dream collaborators like at a somewhat like realistic level. And you got me thinking about that, because I mean, there's a lot of different animation studios I'd like to work with and different animation type shows. But as far as like, I want to get more into live action, and two filmmakers I really love. One's named Panos Cosmatos, and he directed a film called Mandy that it just totally blew me away tonally. The music score by Johan Johansson is like one of the best scores I've heard in years. So I'd love to work on one of his films. That would be crazy. And then another guy, another director named Nacho Vigalondo, who directed my favorite movie of all time called Time Crimes. And he has done a few other features, and like I just think he's just one of the most exciting filmmakers around, and I just love him. So yeah, so those are sort of my dream collaborators I'd want to work with. And Trent Rezner, of course. Like, I mean, let's get real.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. If there are there any lingering answers? No. Okay. All right. We're gonna move on to Elizabeth.
I had a question for George. I just wanted to know your favorite part of working on Julie and the Phantoms, like your absolute favorite.
You know, it was funny. It was the first day. I've never done a musical, never even, you know, was even in the track to doing something like this. I walked into set, we were in Vancouver, in this like old club, and there was literally 100 people, about 50 dancers, dressed like in the period of the 20s. And Kenny, which is the director and executive producer, my partner on this, watching the set, the music and everything just come together, you know, for the first day, it was just like a magical thing, because it was a 3-year process for me to get it to that point of, you know, filming. So when everything started, he yelled action, and the whole thing just like literally, you thought you were in a massive musical, you know, Mel Brooks type of thing. It was, you know, it was my first moment after, because you don't realize you know, we're in this business where, you know, things happen and a lot of things don't happen. And so it's kind of surreal when you're sitting there going, man, 3 years ago, I was begging a lot of people to be a part of this. And now it's here, and I'm seeing this whole big production going. That was like the best moment, you know, in the sense of, you know, enjoying it. Because then after that, it was just, it went too fast. I always feel like every time we sell something, it's like it always takes forever. But then the fun part, it's like in a blinking of an eye. It's like it's done fast.
Okay, thank you, George. We're going to go over to Andrew. And for the reporters, if you still have any other questions, please go ahead and put that in the chat and we'll get to you. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is for Matt. What was the most challenging scene to work on in The Hobbit, and what made it challenging?
Well, I was Foley editor in The Hobbit, and I guess yeah, the most challenging thing for me wasn't particularly about the work or the long hours or what to do for it. It was there's in Hobbit 1, there's a bit where all these goblins come rushing down a corridor, and they're chasing the hobbits and making all the, you know, wonderful sound design, wonderful music, wonderful everything. And my job on that was the feet. I was doing goblin feet, and I was cutting every single goblin feet, and I worked, I think, for about 3 or 4 weeks just getting everything in sync and relining it up and making them so that they cut through and everything. And to me, they sounded really good and really scary and really interesting. And then through the process of the mix, more sound effects came in, and then more music came in, and then more dialogue came in, and then sound effects on top of the sound effects, and then more music. And I noticed my wonderful goblin feet just getting fewer and fewer and fewer until there was one left. And I was like, right, that's my contribution to this scene, is that one goblin foot. And then right at the end of the premix, when it was just about to be going to the final, and then no more touching on the goblin feet, someone said, "Oh, I can hear one sound. There's one funny click at the end," and it was my one goblin foot. And I'll just pull that down here, and that was gone. So they're still there. They're still there, my glorious goblin feet, but they don't stand out as much as one would like, being the Foley editor on that film. So that was pretty difficult, but yeah, you get used to it.
I can't wait to watch that scene now. Next time I
Yeah.
watch it,
If you
like,
hear
I
a
can't
goblin
wait.
foot,
You've just changed my whole like viewpoint of
Yeah.
it now. So
if
that's
you hear a
great.
goblin foot,
Ah.
you'll be lifting that curse off me.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna listen for that. That's great.
Thanks so much for that, Matt. We're going to Elizabeth next.
This question is for James. I was just wondering, when working on Total Drama Island versus Total Drama Rama, was there like an evolution into the musical identity of the series? How did you like approach them differently?
Yeah, so the very first thing that the production company came to us with was that they wanted this to be like preschool, and they wanted the music to reflect that. So basically, we were very fortunate that my writing partner, Brian Pickett, has a son who at the time was 8, I believe, old enough that he could take direction, but young enough that he sounded like he could be still in preschool. And so basically, we just more or less wrote our cues the way we would treat total drama, like the regular total drama, and then had Brian's son sing a bunch of, like we multi-tracked him so he sounded like a kid's choir, had him sing a bunch of things over top. And then also we added like toy instruments, like toy piano, music box, little shakers and percussion, like whatever you would find in a preschool music class, like music classroom. So yeah, that actually was all we really did. So essentially we treated all the cues the exact same way. Like if there was a big hit, bum bum bum, we'd hit it like that, but then we would just have Brian's son sing la 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 over top, and that was basically it. And so far that formula seems to have worked really well. So
Awesome. Thank you, James. We're going to go over to Gareth.
Oh, hi. This is for James and Matt. Now, I remembered something a director had said, that you never really finish a film. They're essentially taken away from you. I'm curious how you folks deal with your work in terms of, meeting deadlines, your standards, and then, looking back when you actually see the finished project. Do you sit there and go, man, if I would have just had another week or another day? And how do you balance being a perfectionist and meeting deadlines?
I'll jump in here. That's a really interesting question, because I think every time I see a film, particularly one that I've had a contribution to, I think, oh, what would I do now? Sort of 1, 2, 5, 10 years later, as the zeitgeist changes and as people's understanding of sound changes as well. And I think the best advice that I always give myself is that if you can run on instinct and preserve that main instinct that you had when you first ever saw the film and felt it and felt the actual emotion from the scene, if you can preserve that till the end, then you've done your job. And there'll always be another thing to do, but there is also a danger of overworking stuff. I've seen that happen so many times on films. I mean, I mentioned the little story before, but I've seen that happen where people have heard that scene so many times, they're never getting that fresh air on it, and they keep shaving off the edges and shaving them off and shaving until it just becomes, it loses that sparkle. And I think there is something to be said for actually, okay, it's working, put it down and let it go, and someone else can make of that what they will, rather than trying to get everything perfect. And that's the same, in my belief, that's the same with all pieces of art. I don't think I've ever seen a perfect piece of art, and I don't ever want to, because that would be the end point for me in art. And that's my approach to film. So run on instinct and don't overwork it is my approach, really.
I couldn't agree more. Like that should put that on a t-shirt. I know micromanagement has been difficult over the years on certain projects, and that has taken all of the creative flair out of my soul. And that's the last thing you want your crew to feel. Sorry, my earphones popped out here. I got so excited talking about this. One sec. That's the last thing you want your creative crew to feel, is like just not into it. Like, who cares? So yeah, I mean, it can be pretty rough. Now, I appreciate deadlines in a major way. I appreciate having a target date. It forces me to get the job completed, because as a counterpoint to the work I do for television, I do personal music, like on the side. And I have a personal music project. And my latest album, I've started it in 2015 and it's still not done, right? Like, this is insanity, okay? Like, finishing things is very important. And the phrase that you were mentioning earlier reminds me of one, like, good art is released, great art escapes. And so you work on it until you can't work on it anymore, and it escapes from you. And that tends to be the best stuff. But having that moment when things escape is very important, like having that deadline. So I think also part of the job that we have as composers, and part of the reason why we have the reputation we do, is because we're able to deliver high quality under quick deadlines. And there have been a few clients that have like come to us specifically because of that. Like on Cat in the Hat, they had hired a different composer and it actually didn't work out. And they had burned like 3 months of production time. And so they came to us and were like, we need something in like a week. And it was the first time we actually got no notes back for the pilot episode.
Wow.
It was like, so there's something to be said about the schedule. And I think after doing this for 20 years, like, definitely when I listen back to like season 1 of Total Drama and stuff, like, I find a lot of that music just not up to muster. And so now, though, I think after 20 years, we've gotten really good at just being able to be quick and still be perfectionists as much as we can, and make it actually really good. That's sort of the job, right? So anyways,
Yeah,
that's my answer to that.
That's a really interesting point there, because I saw one of those memes floating around the other day, and it does actually take a long time to actually develop the skill where you can do something that's really good and hits the mark and is on spec and on budget really quickly like that. And I saw this meme floating around, said, I've spent 20 years being able to do this quickly. Just because I do it in 3 minutes, you're paying me for the years, not the minutes.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Really,
because the person was like, why am I paying you this? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, it's 3 minutes plus 20 years.
That's right.
Yeah, totally. And by the way, it's a nice feeling to get to this point in both my age and my career and feel like, hey, I feel like I kind of have got this down. Like, I think when you're starting out, regardless of your discipline in entertainment, there's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of that stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm really enjoying being this age and at this point in my career where I can just be like, I think I'm actually pretty good at this, or like, I enjoy it. And that gives me confidence, and confidence is so important too. Right. Yeah, it's nice to be here after 20 years,
Thanks everyone for that. We're gonna go over to Elizabeth again.
This is actually kind of a follow-up question just to something that George briefly touched on earlier. He said that 3 years ago, before the first day on set, he would have been really excited to be on set. So what changed in those 3 years, and how did you get from wanting it to happen to getting it to happen?
Persistence. I mean, this industry you've got to have persistence, period. I mean, Matt and James can detest this. I mean, especially being in crew is even much more persistent than anything. But in my side is, it's like you have to check every check box, right? Because it's, when you go into package something, you always have to look at it as, you try to pinpoint what a streamer studio might want, right? In the sense of the storyline, director, showrunner, all that. And so we try our best to put all those elements together. That's one thing. And then the other thing that we're against all the time is time, because a lot of people work. And so some people are, they're in promoting something else, or they're writing something else, or they're in a show now and they have to finish. And then, it's a lot of elements have to come in together before you can get to the point of when you get to the studio streamer and say, okay, we're ready to go. And once you get there, then now you're battling a second part of all this, which is now is the creative part. Now you got to pinpoint that, things that they like creatively. And so once you get all those things done, you pretty much are guaranteed to go into, go on set, basically start the production. But again, all that is, I've always tell people this, producing is more than anything is time, right? It's like you spend a lot of time, either getting an intellectual property or, or trying to get a piece of talent, a showrunner to be available. Then when you get to the studio, now you're battling the studios, things, what you are trying to sell them and trying to convince them on. And then once you get to the set, it's like a relief of like, well, first of all, it's a relief. And second thing, it's like, oh my God, I did it. It's like, this is actually did happen. I mean, I'm not that crazy, so it's one of those things. Again, I was saying this before is, my background is finance. So when I got into the entertainment industry, my family were, they were always like, what the hell do you do? It's like, what's a producer? Like, how does that even work? And how do you get paid? It's like, and always you're trying to explain yourself. But at the same time, it feels good when you get to say, hey, go to Netflix and watch this. That's what I do. And it's gratifying. And that's what Julian and Phantoms kind of was, because it became a passion project. And on top of that, we were able to pretty much do what we wanted, when regards to cast, music, just all the elements, and then everything just came together, which was fantastic. And I knock on wood that every other project is like that. They're not most of the time, but that's what you hope for.
Thank you, George. So we have time for one or two more questions. If anyone has any, just let us know, or else we can, end a little bit early, which is also nice. So it's up to you guys, up to the reporters. If you have any last minute questions you want to ask, just let us know. All right, Andrew, go ahead.
Yes, this question is also for George. What are some recent trends that you're noticing in the production and IP development world, especially as we move out of coronavirus?
A lot of international. I've moved my business now. I'm not just Latin American now, South Korea, Germany, Austria, Italy. There's a lot of trends that are going to be happening in that world too, which is there. Like I was just saying this in the beginning to the guys is, people are going to start developing their own things. And then the next wave that I feel that's coming, it's the comic book stuff. The comic book world is becoming much more bigger in the Latinx community. So it's always been big, obviously. There's going to be, for sure, publishing houses coming out soon that are going to be focused on that, which is great that we're in front of it right now. But it's going to be a huge wave of creative people, creatives who are creating, like I said, comic book stuff that are just unique and something new and just fresh. And then again, the international world, it's, I think Matt was saying this is, there's a lot of talent coming out of that crew right now. I mean, like you mentioned The Orphanage, which is one of my favorite movies. You get surprised because you go, whoa, this came out of what? Where? And you're going to see a big pool of talent, especially on the crew side, start making their way over here and collaborating with the people here, which is going to be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
All right, and we're going to go over to Gareth.
So question for everybody. I'm just curious about technology. What technology are you most excited for that's coming? And how would you say, for example, compared to 10 years ago, what are technologies that you use now that you wish you had back then?
I'll jump in here. So 10 years ago, I was working on a Mac that had, I think it was 6 gigabytes of RAM. And it was really difficult to do my job. So while I was bouncing out at 3 o'clock in the morning, bouncing out all my stems of the various parts of the orchestra, it would like get halfway and I couldn't even do, I had to do real-time bouncing. So it actually plays through the song because they didn't have the quick bounce, whatever that option is called now. And it would get halfway through, 3 minutes in and just, that's it, start over. And I'd be up till 5 in the morning, just trying to bounce down what I was working on. Now I'm at, I think, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm about to buy a Mac that I'm going to put about 750 gigs of RAM in.
Oof.
And so I will be able to operate NASA and it's going to be amazing. And I can't wait. The one I have now that I've used for the last like 7 years, I honestly can't even remember how much RAM is in it, but it's a lot. It was like maybe 100 gigs or something like that. But that makes such a huge, 64 gigs. But that was like going from 6 gig to 64 gigs was like, oh my God, my computer never crashes. I'm able to, you can see sort of all of the different tracks that I'm able to run. There's like 100 tracks in here of like 24-bit, full quality sampled orchestras and strings and brass and all of these ways that I can manipulate the sounds. The samples 10 years ago did not sound like they do now. Like it's absolutely mind-blowingly incredible. So that's the technology I'm most excited about is, the new fast computers and the new sample libraries and sample technology that's available now.
Yeah, I was going to say, in the discussion we had before we started the interview, people were talking about, the theater, and there's a little bit of resistance going out to the theater at the moment because of various reasons. And if that means that more people are going to be watching things at home, I'm really interested in the idea that you don't just have to invest in a bigger screen every year. There is so much sound technology coming out now that can double your experience, even triple your experience for a fraction of the cost of another couple of inches on the the LED screen. Soundbar technology has come a long way. We talked to the major government research industry over here, and they've got contacts all over the world now, PhD students that are working on extremely right down the rabbit hole acoustics of producing sound from sound bars that sound like a theater. I think Apple's working on some technology as well, where it's just I think they call it HomePod or something. You just plonk it in the corner and it makes the whole room sound like surround. To me, that sounds like magic.
Wow.
I would like to hear it. But that kind of thing, if you can invest in the sound, and I would say this, wouldn't I? If you can invest in the sound, I reckon that's going to be cheaper and more rewarding than a slightly bigger screen.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The sound is everything. Because you buying a TV every year, it's like, your internet is not, it doesn't have the capability or something, So, but for me, my thing is that now that because of COVID, producers and directors have been editing at home, and so I'm excited to see what's this new wave of new technology is going to be coming out now that a producer like me or a director who's doing multiple things, multiple shows, you can now actually do it either on your iPad or your computer or something. How that's going to look now in the next, wave, because it's pretty exciting. I mean, you become more mobile, more responsive instead of being like it was before. You had to be in the room. Now it's like, everyone. What I'm seeing right now is a lot of people they're even more comfortable not being in a room. They're comfortable with people just doing the Zoom thing and sending cuts and all that, which is super efficient.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.